Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to Insurance Innovators live stream discussion, the CX Revolution, delighting customers and delivering profit, hosted in association with PA Consulting. Great to have you with us here today. Now, look, we're living at a time when customer expectations of services are higher than ever, and your brand's reputation and market share depend on delivering one thing above everything else: excellent customer experience. Obviously, the pandemic has forced face-to-face interactions to plummet and quick and painless digital services to soar, but we all still value a helping human hand when things get difficult. So today, we'll be discussing how to achieve profitable growth and great customer experience at the same time. Which new tech is improving experiences? What about the role of operations in CX delivery? Ultimately, how can we all increase market share and profit by improving customer experience? Well, we have lots to get through, don't we? So let's meet our panel of unbelievable experts. First of all, Ian Thompson. Hello, Ian.
Hi, Lindley. Hi, everybody.
Great to have you with us. Ian is the Group Chief Claims Officer at Zurich Insurance. Now, he has over 20 years of experience in general insurance, as well as in risk control, risk management, and claims leadership. In recent years, Ian's been focusing on Zurich's claims development with a passion to drive customer service performance. Great to have you with us today. Next up is Dave Anderson. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Lindley. How are you?
Yeah, very well. How are you?
Fine. Not too bad at all. Thanks.
Very good. Dave is the Director of Technology at Liberty Mutual. Now, he tests and explores how new technologies, including cloud, AI, machine learning, and voice, can be integrated into Liberty's business strategy. He's a lifelong programmer and brings deep technical knowledge to the table, particularly in terms of the ways in which tech can be used to improve user experience. Great to have you with us. Next up, we have Jurgen Taalesen. Hello, Jørgen.
Hello, everybody.
Great to have you here. Jørgen is a Senior Vice President at Gjensidige. Now, he's responsible for service strategies and for exploring new opportunities across product lines and geography. And he's fascinated by how new digital innovation can help to go above and beyond for customers. Great to have you here from Oslo. And next up is Richard Bevin. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Lindley. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Great to have you here from Brightside. Richard has been the Chief Operating Officer at Brightside for just over 18 months. Now, he's a vastly experienced executive with a long track record in a variety of blue chip companies and a background of senior roles in financial services at the likes of Lloyds Banking Group, Bank of New York, and Barclays too. And last but certainly not least is Scott Paton. Hello, Scott.
Good afternoon, Lindley.
Great to see you again. Scott is a senior partner at PA Consulting and leads their work across the insurance industry. Over the course of 25 years, Scott's helped clients to develop compelling new customer experiences, transform ways of working, and adopt bold approaches to integrating new technologies. Absolutely fantastic to have you with us. What a panel. Okay, now you at home, I assume you're at home, are the sixth person on our panel today. We've got two questions that we'd love to hear your feedback on. You should see a set of poll questions in the feed below us. They cover some of the key issues that you might want to think about to stay ahead of the curve. So here is the first question for you. Right, so do answer these questions during the webinar and we'll get to them just a bit later on. But what is holding insurers back from being more customer-centric? That's the first question. 1, cost, or organizational structure, or technology, or strategic direction and culture, or legacy systems. Now, of course, all of them will play into each other. But right now, where you are, what do you see as the key ones to click on? Please let us know. That'd be great. And we'll answer those later on, have a chat about those. Here's the second question. What is your expected time period for ROI related to CX transformation? How long will it take you to get your money back? 1 year, 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years, or 6+ years? Be honest if you can. We don't need your names, just your honest opinion. So have a look at those now and let us know exactly what you think. Okay, so over the next hour, we'll be covering lots of ground and you're bound to have, apart from the poll questions, your own burning questions or comments for us. So we'll put your questions direct to the panel a little bit later on. Simply send them in throughout the webinar, either using the Twitter hashtag, which today is CX Revolution, or the question section on our webpage. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of our discussion. So lots of ways to get in touch today. We really, really want to hear from you. Right, let's get started. We're feeling the ripples of the current disruption in all aspects of our daily lives, aren't we? And it's certainly impacted the way that customers interact with their insurers. Customers want and expect a personalized, frictionless, seamless experience with their insurance provider. And expectations are only getting higher, not least with the inevitable longer-term effects of the pandemic. So let's unpack that and start a discussion today by hearing from somebody else and looking at the current state of play. Scott, kick us off. What do customers, do you think, expect from their insurers, and how have those expectations changed in the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, sure, Lindy. So look, for me, I think there's broadly three things that customers expect from the industry right now. And perhaps controversially, I'm not sure that the industry is responding in the right way across all of these areas. Firstly, they need to be able to trust their providers, particularly when they're feeling vulnerable, for example, at the point of claim. And that's certainly been the case over the last 6 months. And for certain classes of business, I'm not sure that the industry has cast itself in glory on that point. Secondly, they want an easy life. Now, this in itself is inconsistent with the hassle that we all have every year as we have to go out and renew our policies, because the industry has this way of working that penalizes us for being loyal customers. And then finally, they want to engage with their providers in a way that suits them. And on that final point, that really requires a deep understanding of your customers and their needs, and how they vary for different types of customers. And then using that to reimagine a tailored experience, as you say, seamless and across channels of their choice.
Yeah.
You mentioned COVID. I think the main insurers have done very, very well over the last 6 months or so, virtualizing call centers, enabling people to work remotely. But this is just going to continue, as we're seeing over the last few days. And I hope it acts as a catalyst for even more investment in areas like digital.
You've been honest and you've laid out the groundwork very well for us. Jørgen, how do you think insurers have responded to the uptake in digital demand, but also just, the changing customer behaviors, quick as they've been recently?
Yeah, I have to start by saying that I agree with what Scott is saying, that I don't think that the industry has been responding as well as we should. No. And I think one dimension of this is that the approach has been divided. I think most insurance have focused on the claims situation, but very few have been able to lift it up and have a holistic view of the customer experience. And I agree that the customer expectations are higher than ever, but the insurance business is not the same as Spotify and Netflix. So yes, the expectations are high, and the expectations in regards to personalization are high, but the industry isn't that hit as other industries, I believe.
You mentioned a few things there. We'll get into those. Holistic, the way that you have a relationship with customers, we'll definitely get into that. What do you think great customer experience should be in claims? I mean, Jørgen just mentioned that people have been focusing on claims, of course, because that's a defining moment if you have to claim. But holistic, does it stretch beyond the claims process, or does it have to be really focused on claims, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really good challenge. But I guess from a claims perspective, a couple of years ago, I would have said the key things to focus on were, setting expectations and meeting them in the first contact, communicating through the claim, and then, settling things as quickly as possible. I guess what COVID has taught us as well, though, is that those basics might be true, but actually when it comes to it, people want accessibility. They need to get hold of somebody when they need them. They need empathy. And I think that's really, really important through this recent challenge, developing challenge, continuing challenge. And then I think it's demanded flexibility as well. So this is kind of an environment in which, just religiously following a process because that's what's in front of you is not going to deliver for the customer. And ultimately, the innovation, digitalization, agility, all the things we've talked about, but maybe haven't been so great, as Scott has said, are kind of rising to the challenge on them. We've really had to grasp these and say, no, this is how we need to work.
We'll come to your thoughts on our first poll question in just a couple of minutes time. So do get in touch. If you can see that poll question, give us an answer. Give us the one that you think is particularly relevant to you right now in that first question. I'll come to them in 2 minutes time. Richard, sorry. Look, business models have to be very flexible. You have to be able to respond quickly. So how do you create a customer-centric business model, particularly from a broker's point of view, because you're with clients all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing, I totally agree with Scott. Number one has got to be trust. And boy, oh boy, have we done a big job in reducing trust in insurance across the board. And that's challenging for brokers and insurance companies. So there are certain sectors where I think we've gone considerably backwards. So there's some rebuilding to do. I think the second thing is, I think many of us have been very product focused. We talk about selling products, we don't talk about customers. And then we talk about customers as some homogenous mass that are all the same, and that what we're trying to do is give them all this same experience. Well, we are a niche broker. Most of our customers have been through someone else's digital journey and got compute that says no. So, then you have to work out, well, do we take them through another digital journey where they get a better answer? Do they need to speak to somebody? So my view is you've got to really understand who your customers are at a very granular level, and then deliver the experience that they want and that they expect. I think the third thing is the COVID transition has totally transformed the way customers think about digital experiences, because they've had to, because it doesn't matter whether you wanted to go and visit your bank and that's what you always did, or whether you wanted to buy something in a shop or whatever. None of that has worked. Most insurance companies have been absolutely slammed with excuses of I can't get through on the phone. So customers have had to learn through accident and suddenly realized it's okay. So I think we've got a magical moment actually to respond to that, because I think we've seen people who are 18 and 80 really embracing, because they've had to, not because we've done anything brilliant, it's because they've had to. Everyone screwed it up, and now they're thinking, well, it's not too bad. But I don't think that's a let's all go be digital and it's all going to be magical for customers. I think absolutely the blend of how do we mix the right easy digital experience with the right human interaction, so we don't have humans doing stuff, we get that blend right. That's the challenge.
There are so many things I'd like to quiz you on there, because that wasn't the most glowing review of the insurance industry, and I really want to find out why you feel that way. But we'll get into that, I'm sure, in due course. And there's a lot of smiles that you can't see at home with people understanding what Rich is talking about. But Dave, before we get onto the poll questions, let's talk about the pain points of the customer journey, things that do come up regularly that could ease my route through to claims if I need to do that, or just in terms of the way I interact with you on board or whatever it is. What are the big pain points, and what could be improved?
Well, you also need to think from a global perspective. Like from Liberty Mutual, we're a global insurer, so you got all the different lines across all the different types of culture. If we kind of really spread it out, and one thing I think we do need to do, as Jurgen said, is take a holistic view of that kind of experience. And then when you start thinking about who is the customer, it's not necessarily just the policyholder. You've got brokers, you've got underwriters. There's a whole chain of people involved in that in the industry. So if you think of it almost from a service design lens, that experience could last many years as you start a relationship and end a relationship with an insurer. So you got to think about all those different touch points. So you said it, Lily, in your intro. It's that frictionless experience, because let's face it, nobody wants to spend all day talking about insurance, trying to figure out how to pay a bill or file a claim. That's not what this. What we need to do is when the customer comes to us, you need to basically predict what they thought they want and resolve that as quickly as possible. So I think that's a completely different way of thinking. And I often think that some of the fintech things we've seen with consumer banking is maybe slightly ahead of insurtech. So there's a great study called builtformars.co.uk, where a UX designer has done a complete case study on banking. And it's really interesting to see the different pain points that they pick up. And simple things like, how long does it take you to send a letter? What's the experience on the site? How do I sign up? There's a whole range of things that it's worth, I think, every insurance company looking at to try and remove friction from that customer experience journey.
Let's jump into the poll questions, the poll answers, because to that point, Dave, there were some really good points you've made there, obviously, as well. I'm sorry to bring you guys out to talk about insurance. As you say, not everyone wants to talk about insurance all day, but we're here to do exactly that. Poll answers. The question was, what's holding insurers back from being more customer centric? I'll go from lowest number of answers from you at home to the highest. Thanks for your answers. Technology, 9%, the lowest concern. Equal at 14% each was cost and organizational structure. So tech, cost, organizational structure. Now the big ones, legacy systems, of course, 29% of you thought that was holding you back. And then 34% was strategic direction and culture. Now, I want to talk about legacy for a moment very quickly, and then we'll do strategic direction before we move on. Legacy systems, first of all, Dave, back to you. Look, I mean, you must wake up in the middle of the night every day of your working life and think legacy, have the word legacy coming up, repeated on you.
I think, well, legacy is sometimes a good thing because it means you have a system that works and it's been running for a long time. We prefer to use the term heritage. What's more important is how you deal with that system. What's your engineering approach to that system like? If you lock it away and wrap it in cotton wool, then you're storing up trouble for yourself. But if you treat it like a proper system and continue to evolve it, it can actually work for you. So in some ways, I wouldn't blame the system. It's probably the approach to the system is often the problem.
Thanks, Dave. Scott, if we only called it heritage, it would feel better, right? So legacy systems could be,
Yeah. Look, it's just a part of the industry, isn't it, to have these legacy systems? But the important thing is, within those systems, there's all sorts of really valuable information that could really enhance the customer experience, could really help us to understand our customers in a way that we perhaps don't at the moment. And particularly if you then enhance that with other data that might be external data. It was interesting on the survey that you just mentioned. I'm not sure if you mentioned data being a barrier to experience, but maybe it's kind of combined with the technology or legacy challenge. But I see that as being a real big barrier in addition to the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah. In some ways, we could have put data in there with technology, with legacy. I mean, legacy, what's the problem with customer experience? Well, because the data is not being handled perhaps in the right way. So I suppose that's right. But one final thing, I'll throw it to Richard, strategic direction and culture. Look, culture comes up in all industries. It is fundamentally important. I think, we've all been reminded of that in the last few months. And we'll be in the next few months too. That's what people at home think is the most important barrier that probably needs to be stripped down.
I think there's a couple of things here actually. One is on the strategy side. I think you've got to be bold and doing things like we did of saying, right, we are going to work from home come what may is a bold decision, and bloody hell has that proved to be the best decision we've made. But had I a year ago said to my colleagues, you know what, I've got a really good idea, we're all going to go work from home, we'd have been kicked out the door and I would be in the madhouse. But so I think one is about being bold. It's you can come up with all the books and plans and slides and all that sort of stuff. You have to be bold. The culture one, I think, is a very big one for the insurance industry generally, and certainly in broking, because the culture is an industry that's grown up with itself, in and of itself. It talks to itself, and it's very, very poor at looking outside. And what we've been trying to do is to give many of our people who are influencing change a view outside of insurance, because until they see it, they can't see the art of the possible, and all they can see is all the barriers that we've got. And back to that legacy system point, actually they're starting to learn, forget the legacy thing, build around it, get to Scott's point. If you've got the data somehow or other, you can make all the rest work. So actually your legacy question is usually, I've got a policy platform that was built 30 years ago. Fine, build around it. And only when you can go and see what others have done, I think you can start to change that. But I think it works both for strategy thinking and for the culture of a firm.
Great stuff. What a start. We have to push on. Digital channels now dominate the customer journey, don't they? It's a huge challenge to recreate genuine emotional connections. And with that in mind, how can insurers make sure they invest in the right customer experience areas, refocus on the customer, and connect those all important human and digital touch points to provide a really good customer experience? It's a familiar question, but more important than ever right now. So let's start with personalization. Jørgen, kick us off. To what extent do you think personalization is the key to gaining and retaining trust and loyalty, and how do we do it?
So I believe personalization is the absolute key to obtaining both loyalty, building trust, and also becoming a more differentiated insurer. And I believe the way to do it is to start by using the data you already have, and further develop your channels and the entire value chain build on existing insights. And if you succeed in building good personal customer experience in that value chain, it will be a self-reinforcing strategic force, building more loyalty, meaning that you can ask your customers to share more data and further enhancing both the services and the products. And doing that, you will build trust and you will build loyalty. Yeah. You will lower your acquisition cost and you will build your profitability. So that's
can I just ask a very quick question? You can bat it away if you want to, but what seems to be really important is a mindset. So, we've talked about legacy, we've seen all those areas there, the handling of data we talked about, and we will talk about, but why is that not happening? I mean, it is mainly, I assume, about investment, about legacy, about the systems we have to use to carry on with our business. But why do you think, from your perspective in Oslo, are things not changing?
That's a difficult question.
I'm sorry, you can bat it away.
Yeah, but I can try to answer that. I think building a culture, a value-driven culture, in which what that the ultimate goal is to know your customer best and give ultimate service in the entire value chain. I think that's the key. Yeah.
Richard, let's talk tools for a minute. What tools do you think are helping brokers to deliver a better service? Just give us a couple of examples if you can.
A few things. I mean, data and the use of data and analytics to drive a better customer experience is one of the key things that we've been really focused on, hiring smarter people to come up with better analytics to tell us how our customer journeys are working, for example, and what we can do to improve them. I'm a great believer in systems thinking, and we did a lot of that work in looking at our organizational lens through a very, very detailed analytical approach to systems thinking. We made a 40% productivity gain in one of our businesses just by simply looking at the crap that we used to do every day, the hell that we used to put our customers through, and saying, why do we need to do this? So I'm a believer in sort of get the customer experience mapped and thought through before you spend money on technology, because I think what you end up doing is just spending a lot of money trying to paper over a problem that you didn't really have in the first place had you thought about it. So I think there's a few tools, and I'm certainly not one to reach out to technology as the answer, but I think there are things like contact center platforms, for example, that are much smarter than they used to be, that give a sort of out of the box better customer experience. And tools like, if you're managing a contact center, you don't have a workforce management tool, as we need to become more and more flexible, and that's what our workforce are expecting. You can't do that on spreadsheets anymore. You'll just screw it up. So, there are some tools I think we all need to have, just 101 tools to run the business better. But data and analytics is the one for me that's the big investment to make it better for the business and for our customers.
I'll throw that to Scott in a second, but Ian, I feel like I haven't spoken to you for a little while now. So let's talk about one word that I think is probably, from a customer point of view, is so important, which is transparency. And then it leads to relationship. How important is it to bring transparency into the way you deal with customers? And we'll use the word holistic throughout that journey.
Yeah, it's look, it all comes back to that trust point, which is transparency is just another facet of this. As we're seeing at the moment, the issue of a perceived or actual lack of transparency on policy wordings, and customers have actually bought, and therefore what their expectations are. So there's something there about making sure that we keep things simple. I think as well, the modern environment as well, and trust and transparency is, what are you going to do with my data when you get it? How do I know you're going to use it for the things that I want you to use it for? How do I trust you to do that? And be transparent with me around what you're going to use the data for. And then look, linking back to the whole claims piece as well is, fundamentally, I believe that so much of the reputation of the insurance industry rests on this principle, this feeling that customers have is, if I have a claim, it's going to be really, really difficult. And bottom line is, insurers are going to try and just not pay out on claims. We've got to change that perception, because we are not all here. I can't speak for the whole industry, but I can tell you from our perspective in Zurich, that's not what we're about. And therefore, we have to give transparency to the way we think about things, how we work through things, so people understand that process. And that links to communication, it links to data, it links to personalization, and it links to starting with, how can I help you, rather than what's your policy number. And I think the start at that point of the conversation completely changes 180 degrees around how somebody will feel when they reach out to their insurer.
Again, these are conversations that have been had for so long, and I wonder whether there isn't something we could talk about right now that would take us the next step. I mean, the communication is very important. If you, from a claims point of view, Ian, you know better than I do that if you have a conversation with your customer, if you can open up a conversation that lasts more than once a year or once every 2 years, if you have that conversation, then not only are you more likely to have a better relationship, and they are likely to be able to move quickly through the claims process, but also you'll know more about them. You'll have that conversation open already. That conversation needs to happen now, doesn't it? Especially now in our current times.
I think it's one of the insurance dilemmas, isn't it? As we've touched on already, some of my fellow panelists have touched on is insurance can often be just a distressed purchase. I have car insurance, therefore I've got to, finally get around to sorting it out. So nobody go in the morning going, I'm going to have a great day because I'm going to start off by going out and buying some insurance. That starts a negative journey straight there. And then, then you have the experience of doing it and whether or not you feel you've had a fair treatment in that. And if you have to make a claim, how you feel in that. So we've got this difficult relationship with customers, and we have to reshape this. And what you're seeing is, an increasing approach to say, how does actually insurance fit into a broader ecosystem of services and relationships that customers are looking for? Let's not kid ourselves, therefore, about our role. And the role of our brands is actually, if you're buying, smart home, you're buying into a whole range of technology that will help you live simpler. And therefore, insurance is just a piece of that jigsaw.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at something like WellCare, where we're investing a lot in building, new platforms around that, actually, how can insurance build a relationship which is around stopping you getting ill in the first place?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's the whole
strange as a claims guy, but I've got this Harry Maguire, the Maguire paper in my head which says the zero claims organization. How do we use data and insight and personalization to stop the claims happening in the first place? Because it'd be a far happier world.
Scott, how do you stop people claiming in the first place because the data is good? Ian asked the question. How do you do it?
I completely agree with this thinking about the broader role that you could play in the customer's ecosystem. And at the heart of this is claims is a great example. Rather than thinking about how we can make the claims experience as good as it can be at the point that somebody needs help, how about we start thinking about what can we do to prevent those loss events in the first place? And Ian touched on this. And this goes back to your question, Lindy, about technology, because, we've talked about some of the material foundational points. But what about the sort of Internet of Things type technology, whether it's kind of your Nest devices, your Ring devices, your leakage detector devices? Imagine what an exceptional experience customers would get if insurers were stopping things happening in the first place, rather than optimizing what the experience is when something goes wrong.
That's right. Exactly. Dave, let's talk AI for a minute, because again, there are many tools and techniques that you could start to detect better and understand what's going on with your customers and open up those conversations. But what do you think AI, augmented or artificial, could do to improve the situation?
I think that's a great segue. I mean, just as Scott was saying there, like at Liberty Mutual, we spend a lot of time and effort on the protection and prevention of things. And instead of trying to sell people policies, it's about how can we help you with your mobility, your shelter, and your commerce. It's a different way of looking at things. And we try and use some of our AI expertise in that regard. But when I think of AI, I really think in 4 different areas. First of all, voice, like natural language processing. Imagine you can call up. We've built things like this where you can actually speak to like an Alexa to give you information very quickly. Or like if I have a quick query, I can get that resolved really quickly without waiting around. So from a voice perspective, from vision, computer vision, you can use automation, damage estimation, do an analysis ahead of time to kind of, inform you of things that may happen. And then from decision making, there's lots of guided decision making, like assistance. Can I personalize your experience? Remember preferences, maybe suggest things that you might need, and then finally automated. completely automated decision making for kind of fast decision making. If I have an incident where there's maybe low damage, that I can have a zero touch kind of experience through that, to really speed up things. And what all of these things do, in my experience, is they free up a lot of our personnel to actually sit and have those empathetic conversations with policyholders. When you ring up your insurance company, you want to have a conversation. You don't want to be guided through how to take photographs of your car. Like, that should be just dealt with. You want to have that conversation. So I think that's, for me, where data and AI really kind of kick in.
One thing that came up from our poll earlier on was the need for strategic thinking, and we spoke about it a little while. Now, that sounds like if you could have a conversation with the people within your organization and allow everybody to be part of that strategic, that makes a lot of sense, Dave. What you just said makes a huge amount of sense. So is the problem that things aren't quite joined up as they should be? Richard, is there a disjoint to get the organization behind or understanding these really good tools and techniques that could help the customer experience? Is there a disjoint?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest fear is the loss of work. If you look at all insurance companies and most brokers, the vast majority of the people employing are doing data input of some way, shape, or form, or moving data around. It's not adding value; it's simply inputting stuff. And a lot of people we employ, all at the kind of lowest end paid, that's what they're doing. And what we're talking about through all these technologies are things that will replace most of those. And what we'll see, in my view, is a much smaller number of much higher skilled, much more competent, much better trained people who will be delivering that I need to talk to someone service, and the rest will go. So I think the challenge you've got in then talking about we want to be more digital and we want to use some of these techniques is that it is a very short hop, skip and a jump to that means I'm going to lose my job. And I think that's a lot of the barrier to people who currently have a big organization running customer service. And you're saying, actually, whatever you say, customer service centers do not delight customers. No one wants to call one. So whatever you do to say, have a nice day, you're still not going to delight a customer. It's nonsense. You need to stop a customer doing it. But you try explaining that to the 250 people at Cone doing it today in a way that actually makes them feel happy. So I think there's quite a challenge in getting an organization of today aligned behind that sort of digital future. But God, we have to do it. Yeah, and that's bound to culture. Look, we'll move on a second. I'll throw it to Scott before we move on. But just want to let you know the poll, second poll will come, is there right available to you now. So if at home you wouldn't mind just flicking on the option that you think for the second poll question really applies to you in terms of the timescale for ROI from customer experience, let us know right now. I'll go to it in just like a minute or two's time. So get in touch. Scott, sorry, yes. So what do you think on these points?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Richard said, because I completely agree with those vested interests. To our mind, when we've looked at this, we've studied this issue, there has been hundreds of millions of pounds that have been invested by insurance firms in various initiatives that just have failed to deliver value. And we've been examining, well, what is behind that? And we think it's quite simple. We think too much of the focus has been inside out. So in other words, looking at what we do and how we're doing it and thinking about how we can tweak that and enhance it and optimize it and how we deal with some of the vested interests. Our view is it has to be outside in. Start with the customer experience, use that as the North Star and redesign around that. And just use that and get the customers involved in that process. And our view is that the value will be that much higher and that much more quickly realized.
Excellent. Well, listen, we must move on. We're about 10 minutes away from your questions. So we have the poll answers through here. I'll get to them in a second, but please do keep sending in your questions while you're watching us live. We will devote the last 10 or so minutes to your questions. So keep sending those in. And you can do it either through the webpage here or you can do it on Twitter. And if you're feeling publicly minded today, CX Revolution is the hashtag. Okay, so ROI is now obviously a key measure of success for insurers, as it is for most businesses. So in this third section, let's take a look at how excellent customer experience translates to customer retention, to competitive advantage, profit, and ultimately growth. First, let's take a look at the results of that second poll. And the question was, what is your expected time period for ROI related to customer experience transformation? Okay, now I have the results here, so let's have a look. From the bottom to the top, I'm pleased about one. The first answer is 6+ years, 0%. I believe that's none. So I'm pleased to hear about that. Next is 1 year. At 15% of you think 1 year would be a reasonable time to get money back essentially from customer experience activities. And then 4 to 5 years is actually at 21%. But most of you, around 64% of you, believe that 2 to 3 years is a reasonable time to find ROI in your customer experience. Now, look, Jørgen, can I throw that to you just for a second? You know, what do you think about that? You know, we talked before we came on, and my naive mind said, well, if you're doing it well now, you've got instant customer experience, you've got instant longevity, so 1 year should be the way. But people at home understandably say 2 to 3 years. What do you think?
I think the poll reflects that most of the viewers work in insurance business, in the insurance business,
yeah.
Because things take more time than we like to. I think that's a realistic poll, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And Richard, what do you think about that? And never short of a few coarse words for the industry.
Well, yes, I think a few things here. When we set out with a purpose to do something, it's amazing what you can do in a very short time. And my best example for us is working from home. 6 weeks from making the decision, 500 people worked at home. So I think partly it's do you really want to do this? And are you really committed to it? That's one. And my experience, as I talked earlier about when we did the customer thinking work, within 3 months, you can see very significant wins, and you don't even need to spend a fortune on tech at that point, and you can drive that. And if you can get that early win stuff out, for me, that then pays for the pain points that remain, and therefore you can have a rolling ROI as opposed to a huge project that is really risky, that scares everybody to death, that involves multi-million pounds. No one wants to sign off. You fire the person that first thought about it because it didn't deliver, and you sack the consultants and bring in the next lot, and all that stuff we all know about. We've just got to do things differently, in my view. And I think and Scott and I've talked a lot about this. We have to change the way we think about change. We don't have 3 years to do it. We don't have we're not going to do this by the old-fashioned mega change project. We've got to do it differently, in my view.
Ian, what do you think?
I think Richard's made some great points there. And look, I guess if I'd been asked the question, our usual strategic cycle is 2 to 3 years. So I probably would have lumped for that one as well. But actually, there's that piece which is the incremental improvements you could be making every day without needing a business case to do it. Unleash the power of your frontline people, because it's amazing how much they have locked up and just want to do something with that we're holding them back on. But I think the other thing as well is for our organization, it's something I've challenged many a time, which is when you look at the business cases, how is that customer return on investment actually quantified along the shutting down legacy systems or saving headcount or reducing costs? And I think we need to, if we want to be truly customer centric, then we need to actually put the customer experience, put a value around it, and put that as the primary measure of our drivers for change.
Yeah.
Even with KPIs and the like, it is difficult to really evaluate in terms of the way that your business works better and the way your people feel about the way they operate with customers. It's difficult to evaluate that when actually you're looking at the bottom line, especially in difficult times like this. So, having the stories from your frontline people, if I can use that phrase, the people who are dealing with customers, having those people share great stories from their end, not just the organization saying, Janet today did this great piece of work and it brought in business. Well, that'll be interesting. This is, again, back to transparency in relationships. Scott, I saw you smiling. We'll move on and say, but I saw you smiling very widely during those points as well. Does that make a lot of sense?
So look, I'm in complete agreement with the things that Richard and Ian said. Our philosophy with these things is we encourage our clients to think big. So think about the art of the possible over a longer period of time. Start small, identify those areas that you can move a dial very quickly, and then scale fast. For us, if there isn't payback within each initiative that you run, if there isn't payback within 12 months, it's not worth doing. And I think that requires that mindset shift that Richard and Ian were both talking about. This point about staff and how you can sort of focus on them and the impact on them. Thinking about agent needs or staff needs is a big thing. What they really want to be doing is adding value to their customers. And too often, the way that we've designed our ways of working make it really hard and tough for them. And all of this is a win-win. Get the experience right for the customer, you'll get the experience right for your staff, and you'll see benefit all around, in my opinion.
Lots more nods there. We'll come to Dave in a second, talk about technology and ROI, but let's go to Jørgen now. Look, let's evaluate what excellent customer experience does in terms of competitive advantage. You know, how can you deliver something more for your business almost instantly by competitive advantage if you do it really well and you're known for doing it well through customer experience?
Well, I guess one thing you have to really need to have in place to succeed in that is to have a really clear strategic decision that customer experience is key for the entire business.
Right.
And my point of view on that is that if you are really good in customer experience and you're good in implementing that in the entire value chain, it will self-reinforce the way of doing product development, customer dialogue, and that can make a different, really make you a different company than the competitors. Because if you're able to implement this in your entire value chain, it's much harder to copy.
Yeah.
And I will just give you an example from my own company. We looked at the child insurance product, which is easily copied. It's an accident insurance for babies from 3 months to your child is 25 years old. And traditionally, we're just giving this product to all children and having the same customer experience, regardless if you have a baby or a teenager. So what we started to do is take the outside view into the company and say, okay, if the baby has certain needs, the communication has to be different, the product has to be different, the claims process has to be different. So we split up the product and we split up the customer dialogue and we split up the claims process driven by the customer insights. And I think that's key to making a good differentiated company.
It sounds as though you also created kind of a blueprint for the way that you as an organization did it, which cannot be replicated.
No, it's really hard. You have to be really dedicated and you have to have a holistic view of it.
Mm-hmm. Let's, Dave, just for a minute, we'll talk about ROI on digital investments, because again, that's, you know, there are many barriers to making this all work fluidly, and, you know, people will obviously always think about, well, what can I do to get more ROI from my investments, my digital investments? Now, look, Scott's almost covered this in some ways, but you know, how do you aim better, or do you think about your platform? Do you think about, you know, the way you're working? You've already covered a few of these bits.
Yeah, I mean, I think the traditional approach would be like, we'll build a huge platform and see what happens. But one thing that we did in Liberty Mutual about maybe 6 years ago, we did 3 things as part of change. We customer-centric, making that a first-class citizen, going from the outside in. Agile transformation, let teams respond very quickly, and then move to public cloud as a great enabler for speed. So if you think of those things, you can respond in weeks, not years. And that's the headspace we need to be in. So when I think, if you're really talking about ROI for digital investments, the first thing I would do is not a technology thing. I would invest in UX, user experience. Like, I like the idea of an anthropologist. Go and sit beside your user, spot a pain point and fix it. You can do that within 2 weeks. That's a good first step. You can get ROI straight away. Or you can say, I'll build a huge platform and it'll be great in 2025. Good luck with that.
Yeah. But how do you get? How do you do that en masse? Because, you know, you can sit beside hundreds of customers, but, you know, in terms of the awareness and the fact you want customers to really have a say in the experience they're getting, how do you scale that up?
Sure. I mean, for me, that's the UX discipline. It's all, we touched on this earlier. It's driven by data. You go through that, what's called telemetry. You put data in every point of that. You get the qualitative kind of input from talking to people, and then the quantitative from the data, and you start to see the trends and patterns. Yeah. But it's really important to start releasing that value really quickly, because if you do go into analysis paralysis, you'll never get there. So start quickly on the easy wins, and then just keep iterating and scale it up. But I think UX is a absolutely foundational kind of capability for that.
Lots of questions coming through from home, so we'll get onto those in just a few minutes. Let's carry on for a second. Brokers, Richard, how do you? We'll talk to Ian in a second about call centers as well. In terms of brokers, how can brokers harness or use tech better to look to drive cost savings, efficiencies, but also importantly provide better customer experience?
I think there are a few ways, and I've touched on some of them, so I don't want to repeat too much. But one is, and I think it's been said a lot, is start with the customer and bring the customer back into the organization. Have a look at it through that lens. That is the most important thing, I think, because actually only when you say it like that do you realize how bad you are, and you realize all the pain you're putting your customers through, and then you can see the things that need fixing. Second, and it's also been said, talk to the frontline folks, because every day they are the poor guys and girls who have to deal with what you've designed for them, not that they've been designed. And I think the third point is it's tempting to just get overwhelmed. I mean, if I count the number of people that message me every day telling me they've got a fabulous AI solution, a chatbot, this or that, it's hundreds a day, and it's terribly distracting. You could be on conference call after conference call looking at the latest technology. Try and avoid that. Yes, of course, look outside. Yes, see what's there, but make a decision what you want to do. Focus and get some stuff in and done. And I totally agree with Dave's point that the idea that we're going to go off and spend 3 years building something, it's moving too fast. Go and buy it. Go and find something that's 80% of the way there, that's in the cloud, that is not going to sit in your data center. You get in fast. We're going to put a new call center platform in. It would have been an 18-month project. I reckon I'll get it in 2 months. And it, because that's the way things are moving. But you've got to do that and say, stop all this doing it ourselves. The IT guys don't like it, but that's the only way to go, because you can do it fast.
You've mentioned the frontline staff. You mentioned call centers. Ian, what about call center people? Because look, it's a hard job at the best of times, but we've already heard how important it is to listen to those guys and to feed that back into the business. Could things change? Will call centers, because we might think about chatbots, because we might think of different ways of working, is this all going to change for call center staff, or could they become more important?
I think fundamental for me of the digital revolution, if you like, is that there's this assumption that all of a sudden we're going to throw all our people away and, people won't be important anymore. I think they're actually, I know it's a cliche, but they really are our most important asset. They're the ones interacting with our customers. So we've got to start with the mindset to say, how do we actually nurture this capability that we have, and how do we help these people grow? And I think that's the right thing, is to take a strategic approach to workforce planning. This is not going to change in the blink of an eye. This is going to be a transition over many years. What we need to do is to work with our people to equip them with the different skills that are going to be relevant in the emerging roles that we have. And, that's something that we're investing in, and I know other organizations are as well. When we recruit people for call centers, it's usually, have you worked in a call center before? Now we need to recruit for people who are able to adapt, to be flexible, are problem solvers, who can learn new skills. People that have empathy, but people who can understand digital, can understand data. And these are the people and the skills that we're going to need. So we need to nurture that, support that, help our people grow and develop. And then it will be less about how many people we're losing, but actually how many people are we retaining.
And hopefully their skills will be appreciated greatly as well. That's important. When you feel valued, that's all important. We'll move on in a second. Final question really to Scott, if you don't mind. Look, ultimately, you want to scale, you want to grow, even in these difficult times. So how can customer experience be seen to be something that will drive growth? You need to link them together, really.
I think for me, it's a no-brainer. Everything we've discussed is digging into the components that have an impact on profit and on growth. Retaining customers, selling more products to customers based on that loyalty and trust and ease with which they engage with you. Reducing cost to serve by introducing organizational agility, taking demand out of the call center where it's not needed, making every intervention a value-adding intervention. These are all the levers that contribute to growth and to higher levels of profitability. There's been this ongoing debate about the correlation between excellent service and financial performance in insurance, and I have to agree with the assessment that that isn't proven yet. But I think it's the other factors that impact it more than the question of experience. I think some of the things we were talking about up front in terms of how people perhaps view the industry that contribute more than some of those other things. So for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Okay. Look, it's been great so far. Really interesting stuff. We could have spent a lot more time on every single answer today, but we are not done yet, because now it's time to hear from you at home. Thanks for sending in your questions and comments through Twitter and the webpage today. We'll get to them in just a second's time. Before we do, please, if you can, take a very brief moment to rate today's webinar so far. Questions should be appearing on your feed right about now. Your response is totally confidential, but really useful to us. So thanks for doing that. Okay, it is question time. Let's go through here. We don't have all of your names. We do have a lot of titles. Let's try here. You know who you are, chairman and founder of Neptune Flood Insurance. Thanks for writing in today. What are insurers doing to engage their policyholders beyond the normal touch points of application, renewal, and claims? Now, we talked about this a bit earlier on. Let's just recap. What are the people? I'll throw it to Jørgen first of all. In brief, you know, what are the people who are doing this well and engaging and being more holistic in their contact? What are they doing well? What's the difference?
I think I have to take a Scandinavian point of view of it. But yeah, what we're seeing here is that insurance that are able to introduce new services that enables customers to drive better, have a better health, and yes, also able to make smart choices in keeping their house in order. Those are the insurance that are making great success in that line of business now.
Yeah. A lot of nods on our panel, but Dave, I'll throw it to you for a second. Look, we did talk earlier on, all of us talked earlier on about the transparency, but also the communication. And I think Ian got us on to almost like the idea of, rather than the technical term of, but the idea of reassurance, you know, having a conversation that does reassure and helps people to be in touch and speak more clearly throughout the life cycle, throughout the relationship, throughout the year. So, you know, what else can we do? What else can we do to make that that relationship better?
I think we've experimented certainly with some kind of mobile applications and different channels, and that idea of kind of omni-channel, that there are many different ways that you can contact your insurance company. I think it's important that we don't try and design an application that people want to be on all the time, because that's not the purpose, you know. But I think, agreeing with what Jørgen said there, discussing some of those preventative things, offering adjacent services, you know, informing people, you know, information without a catch, you know, why don't you try this? Like, it's in our interest to keep you safe, so have a look at this. So I think that ongoing dialogue, but getting that right is very difficult. There's a real UX angle to that.
There's some great questions coming through. Let's try this one. I have your title, but not your name. Head of Marketing at Chesapeake Employers Insurance Company. Thanks for writing in. I hope you're well today. Thanks for writing in. So how do you balance effective agent communication with not overwhelming your agents with multiple emails and other modes? Now, we've just touched on this a little bit. That was Richard talking about AI providers throwing him lots of offerings all the time. But Ian, maybe I'll throw it to you. So how do you balance the effective agent communication while not overwhelming them with lots of other things going on and demands on their time?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, viewing agents as not just part of the chain, but also that's really critical element of interaction with the customer, and in some ways treating them in the same way, which is to say, what are your preferences? Creating a mix of pull and push communication. So whether it's a portal where when the agent needs to go and find something out, they can go and find it out, or whether it's critical elements of communication that they said, if this happens, can you please let us know about it?
Yeah. Richard, what do you think?
I think, you know, and the marketing folks on here will not love me. I think, you know, because we've got an industry that's so product push, what you often get is, can you not sell this? Can you not sell this? Can you not add on? And by the time we'll add to the journey length another 40 minutes. And by the end of it, you're going, oh my God, I'll take your key cover for God's sake. And you know, we've got to move away from that. We've got to give the agents data-driven information that gives them better information on whether this is a real need for a customer, and why do we know that through data, so that when the agent is having the conversation, we're starting with something they actually probably need, and then we can have a proper conversation, as opposed to look at this other list of products we've got and why wouldn't you have this, because they're hard things to explain at the best of time. And if you also start with a customer that's either got it, then you've got to say, why is ours better than worse? I think it's really tough. I think we've got to rethink how we do the cross-selling and upselling, so there isn't just a product push, it's a customer experience and it's part of it. Hard to do, but I think we're a long way from that because we're so product centric at the moment.
But doesn't that, Scott, come down to relevance? You know, relevance is so important, not only for the people out there, your customers, but really ultimately for the people inside your business, because if they're not happy, they're not going to communicate very well. They're not going to care about the culture and the, you know, and the way they want the water cooler moments where they're complaining about their supervisor rather than, you know, something more healthy. So, you know, this sounds like it's really important to build a better culture so that you can sell better and sell more relevant.
So I think I've got a slightly different perspective. I don't recognize the way that you've characterized these organizations. I think you go back to, I completely agree with what Ian said, but the people in the call center, the agents, the people handling claims, they care. They absolutely care. They care about the customers. Their frustration isn't with I'm sure it is with supervisors from time to time, but it's more about, have they got the information and the ability and the authority and the tools to give their customers what they need when they need it? And I think that's where we need to focus. And whether it's, we've done some work to reimagine the general insurance experience. And within that, we've got a dashboard, which when you're dealing with the customer, you get all the information about them, the historic information, the sentiment analysis to show you how the customer's feeling and behaving. Absolutely. And give them that to understand the customer need, and then everything else will follow. Don't bombard them, as Richard said, with push this, push this, push this. Let them understand customer need and let them do the rest.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, a question from, apologies if I mispronounce your name, Avinoam Baruch. I hope that's correct. Avinoam Baruch, COO of Privisico. Thank you very much for writing into us. I do read these live, so sorry if that was slightly pronounced wrong. How do you provide proactive support to help mitigate loss? So proactive support. Now, you're not saying to who, but can I just get anyone's thought? Anyone think that they can answer that one? Yeah, Ian, please.
I think it's about speed of response when the customer comes and says, look, you know, we've got a claim. It's how quickly you can get things moving on this. And there are plenty of examples, particularly around kind of large commercial losses, where actually the quicker you intervene, the quicker you start to get the company back up and running, and the quicker you can actually mitigate the overall impact to the customer of it. And certainly when it comes to business interruption, you know, that element of it in a damaged situation, a fire, a flood, helping the customer get back up to speed. It not only helps mitigate the financial loss, but actually it could be reputational and those things that maybe insurance is not covering as well.
Yeah. Okay, it's almost time to go. I'm going to throw the final question really to Scott, just to give us, I mean, you right at the start, you gave us the kind of importance of CX and why, you know, how to get there. And there's a question here saying, what are the 3 must-haves for excellent CX? So just remind us of the top kind of things that you think are important to get customer experience right.
Knowledge of your customers. So you've got to bring the customers into the process when you're looking at need and the things that can be different when you're redesigning that exceptional experience. Secondly, you need to bring all of the people together that have a skin in the game, if you like, in providing that experience. So working in agile ways, cross-functional teams, people that experts in data and the technology and the ways of working in the contact center. All together, and the compliance people as well. There's always that angle. And then finally, this focus on thinking big, starting small, scaling fast. Focus on delivery of value to the customers as quickly as you can. Get those things right, and you can very quickly transform the experience for your customer and realize the benefits from that.
Brilliant. That was a question from the Chief Information Officer at LV, but a perfect way to end. I'm sorry, that's all we have time for. It's been a great hour to explore all things customer experience and to talk through some really practical insights from our panel that are helping insurers to serve customers better in our historically disrupted times. Look, I hope you've enjoyed the last hour, that you've found the tips, the insights, the practical examples from our panel really useful. Thanks for sending in your questions. They've been fantastic as ever, and sorry we couldn't get to them all. But if you do have a minute before you leave us today, please do fill in the poll that should be appearing on the discussion feed right about now to give us your fuller feedback. We really value your opinion. So let us know what you thought of today's discussion, and we can continue to improve these discussions too. Now, if you enjoyed this conversation and you're itching to hear more, join us for our webinar next week, Innovating for the Next Normal Part 2, broadcasting live on the 1st of October at 4 p.m. BST. A link to that should be in your feed now as well. Well, that's all we have time for. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks to our wonderful panel. Until next time, stay safe. See you soon.